What kind of law do you practice?
Run, Captain.
Maritime law. Lawyers of the sea.
Submarine chaser.
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Helmet Sunday Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. I'm very happy today to be talking about the Erie SeaWolves, who play in my native Pennsylvania. I grew up on the other side of the state, outside of Philadelphia, but it's still my native Pennsylvania. The SeaWolves are the Double-A affiliate of the Detroit Tigers. I'm going to be speaking with Dan Simon, who created their current brand and many of the alternates that we'll be talking about. And I'll be talking with Chuck Johnson with the Erie Maritime Museum. And right now, I'm very happy to be talking to the team's president, Greg Coleman. Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, man, I am very happy to talk to you about the SeaWolves. This is a brand that people really love out there. I'm lucky, I apologize for this. I didn't get it from the team store. Dan Simon actually sent me a cap from the SeaWolves that he had created. And so I love wearing that cap around. It's a great logo. It always gets comments. Obviously, Erie, Pennsylvania is not exactly near a sea. I don't know if it's exactly known for wolves, although there's probably wolves. I don't know. There's probably wolves in Erie, Pennsylvania. Can you tell me what the nickname SeaWolves means?
Yeah, I mean, someone was very geographically or topographically challenged when they came up with this thing. But no, the reality is the team started as a short season affiliate of the Pittsburgh Pirates in 1995. And in the process of naming the team, SeaWolves was found to be slang for pirates. So it was a fun way to show that affiliation, but at the same exact time also have a distinct and different brand. That Pirates affiliation changed when the team got a promotion up to Double-A. The team had great success the first few years, and then Major League Baseball expanded. And when that happened, you had the teams come online in Erie and in Altoona at the Double-A level. Altoona is just about as far from Pittsburgh as Erie is, and they had a nice new ballpark that was a few years younger. So that Double-A affiliation with the Pirates ended up going to Altoona and has been there ever since. Erie ended up becoming an affiliate of the Angels, and then eventually moved to the Pirates. And we've been with the Pirates. I'm sorry, with the Tigers, and have been with the Tigers since 2001. So it's we both ended up with nice, long-term, good, strong relationships, but we had a name that didn't quite fit anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We had some choices along the way to make, but ultimately it was a name that had a lot of brand equity in the marketplace. And at different points when we had a chance to change it, we just decided, you know what, let's keep this thing going. There's a lot of potential.
You mentioned that it's been you all have been the SeaWolves since 1995. The logo that they had originally. I try not to be unkind in any way on this podcast, but let's just say that it's dated. There's a certain dated quality to the original logo. It has a sort of clip arty feeling about it. It's a wolf. Obviously, the logo that you unveiled and started using in 2013, created by Dan, is leap years beyond what that original logo was, but it still maintains a lot of the same sort of the crossed bats, like the skull and crossbones, but it's baseball bats instead of the crossbones. It's a wolf with an eye patch and a Pirates hat, which is fun. But obviously, visually, red, a little bit of red, but mostly black and yellow. So there's a strong tie to the Pirates visually, to that original affiliation. Do you have to explain a lot the fact that you're in Erie, Pennsylvania, and you're not a Pirates affiliate? But that logo, there's even a specific Pirates logo that they used, right? Like in the late 90s, 2000s, with an actual pirate wearing the bandana and the eye patch. How much do you have to explain to people that you're not a Pirates affiliate?
I don't think we have to explain it a lot. I think there are people who follow the game closely, and those folks know, and then there are folks who follow it casually, and those folks, to be blunt, don't care. So I don't think we have to explain it a ton. I will say that when we rolled out the revamped identity for the 2013 season, we were very careful during those early years to make red the dominant color to go along with black. We kept yellow in our back pocket, and it wasn't until the 2018 season, when we were going into 5 years, that we said, okay, now it's time to introduce this yellow concept because likely at this point everybody gets it. And so we stayed away from yellow alternates for a good solid 5 years after making the change, just to cement in the folks' minds, hey, look, this is not a Pirates affiliate.
Hmm.
But that being said, we are in Northwest Pennsylvania. You do have a number of folks here who follow the Penguins, the Pirates, the Steelers. They are all black and yellow. So us having an identity that has yellow as part of its color combination, even though we're not a Pittsburgh affiliate, very much is Western Pennsylvania. So we don't feel out of place. And if folks don't quite make that connection, like I said,
Hmm.
yeah, they're those are the folks who are casual fans. They're probably coming out for the fireworks or the ice cream sundaes and the helmets, and the affiliation is a little less important.
It's precisely what I'm coming out for, by the way, is the ice cream helmets. I mean, I love the baseball, I love the atmosphere, but I've got a couple of SeaWolves helmets back there in the collection behind me. Yeah, that is part of the experience for sure. When you and I spoke back in 2016 for the story behind the nickname series that I wrote for sportslogos.net, you mentioned that when you went through the rebrand in 2013, that there was a very brief consideration of renaming the team and sort of looking into like the local history and whatnot. We joked about Erie not being near a sea. It's obviously near Lake Erie, and Lake Erie might as well be a sea, right? Like I don't know what the official distinction is, but the Great Lakes are enormous. You talked a little bit when we talked for the story behind the nickname story about, let's look into, what are some other things? Might we, rebrand entirely, or are we just going to update the existing brand? You mentioned the Battle of Lake Erie and the War of 1812. Like maybe that was something to play on. How much of a consideration was it to go away from that SeaWolves name and do something different that relates to Erie, Pennsylvania?
I think we considered the change. I don't think we spent a lot of time contemplating alternate nicknames. I think we asked ourselves the question of, does this name do what we want it to do right now? Is it distinct? Do people know it? When you say it, is it our ballpark, our brand that pops up in your mind? And
Hmm.
ultimately, we decided to stick with it because the people that we're marketing to, it meant something to them.
Hmm.
And starting from square one, yeah, I think certainly I think we could have created something that was locally relevant, sold nationally, and started over. But you are starting over, and you are pressing reset, and that can be a good thing, and that can be a bad thing. At that time, in our development, we were under a different ownership group. There was a lot of the factors that went into saying, hey, look, this is not the time to press the reset button.
Hmm.
Um, whether that was right or wrong, time will tell. But I think we built a pretty good brand off of a moniker that people were familiar with. And I think when you think about concepts, think about marketability. Pirates it gives you a lot to work with.
Yeah.
There's movie franchises that are based on pirates.
Hmm.
Obviously, you've got obviously professional sports teams that along the same lines. So there are a lot of tools there, and it's very robust from a marketing standpoint. We did consider some other interpretations. You mentioned the War of 1812. Downtown Erie, there's a statue of Oliver Hazard Perry, and his role played in that. And so the consideration, well, should SeaWolves mean pirates, or should SeaWolves mean something else?
Hmm.
They're even like submarines that are SeaWolves. When we came down to it, this was the most robust direction. It gave us the most options, and we get even more options because we're not just a pirate; we're a pirate wolf.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
we also we can howl, or we could say R.
Hmm.
We've got different options we can go with. So sometimes it's actually too much. Yeah, it almost gets a little too cloudy from time to time. But we it gives us a lot of tools to be able to work with. So when you realize that we had this just huge canvas to be able to work with, it felt a little silly for us to walk away from it.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
again, that was our decision, and over time that'll prove us right or wrong.
Sure. Well, it's been a decade and people still love this brand. So I think proven right is probably the answer here. There you referenced two things. One of them is the options that you have with both wolves and pirates. Obviously, with pirates, there's a lot of sort of skull imagery. The iconography associated with wolves is pretty specific too. And you guys have doubled down on that with the actual wolf. I'm going to talk to Dan about this, but you may I wonder if you remember. he submitted a logo for possible inclusion in the suite of logos that was actually a wolf skull. And when you look at it, it's a little bit terrifying, right? Like it's a wolf skull with red eyes and two baseball bats, but instead of a bat handle, it's got like a sword handle instead. And so it's super, like it's not kid friendly, right? Like it went completely the other direction with scary wolf skull, and the team decided not to go with that. But there's a seriousness about this logo that is not the sort of cartoony, wacky, kid friendly smiling gopher or whatever, although Dan did do a gopher logo too. But it's, there was a decision to be more sort of serious, more sort of intimidating rather than sort of wacky and goofy. That obviously was intentional. What was the thinking behind that?
Well, we wanted something we thought had a broad appeal. I mean, the one thing about the old logo that we had, we were already sort of semi serious, if not scary. I mean, our prior wolf had teeth that may as well have had blood coming off them. That's how sharp they were. And so it wasn't like when we downshifted to this, we were making it harder or more aggressive. We were just making it a better logo that was more applicable across the different ways that we would use it. But I think the beauty of what Dan designed is that we have a mark that, depending on how you look at it, he could be smirking. He could be grinning. He could be very, very serious. It's open for interpretation, and I think that's the beauty of it. And then over the years, we have built off of that even more to where we've done different themes from what we call our holiday collection, where we have the wolf wearing a winter hat or a Santa hat or a St. Patrick's Day Irish hat. And we've just we have all of these different offshoots, but it's just become so flexible and versatile. We can keep going different directions. Now I will tell you, we do try to have a broad appeal with the main mark, but I think that over time we've introduced different things that lean one way or another. We introduced a howling wolf mark, which probably leans a little more male, than the what we call our bandana wolf, which is our cap logo, which probably leans a little more female and child. It's a little bit more accessible. I wouldn't say it leans all the way there, but it has a more broad appeal to those segments. We'll be introducing something here in the fall that definitely leans heavily male, probably heavily teen male. And that is for a very specific audience. So we just try to have within our portfolio of marks a little something for everybody.
Well, at the time of this recording, and I don't actually know, I think it's probably, this episode will likely drop after Halloween, but at the time of this recording, it is before Halloween. And your avatar on Twitter right now is a Frankenstein's monster version of the SeaWolf, which is, it's totally fun. I think there's always a positive reaction on I'm primarily on Twitter more than the other social media outlets. There's always such a positive reaction to the different versions of these brands that you put out there. I want to double back on something, actually, because it relates to one of the marks that you have. And it is a story that we talked about back in 2016. This is not something that I just know off the top of my head. You mentioned Oliver Hazard Perry. And, when you were looking at the War of 1812 as possible inspiration for, a rebrand, the story of Oliver Hazard Perry, who was the commander of the flagship Niagara, which is docked in Lake Erie. That was part of the battle. It was a part of a decisive victory over the British in the Battle of Lake Erie. And again, this is all stuff that's in the article because I had to look it up after you and I talked about it the first time. But that ship famously flew a flag that said, "Don't give up the ship." And you told me back in 2016 that flag and that phrase and Oliver Hazard Perry were responsible for the fact that the Erie SeaWolves have a flag-based logo in their suite. And so that story of Oliver Hazard Perry, I don't know how common knowledge that is probably very common for people who are history buffs, but that was not a story that I knew before, looking into this. And the fact that is the inspiration for one of the logos in this suite, I think is a sort of great connection to the local history.
Yeah, it was a way to keep the pirate identity, but also tie into the local relevance. I mean, like I said, there's a statue downtown that honors Oliver Hazard Perry, the Niagara. We've got this great kind of maritime museum that's on the bayfront, and there are certain times of the year we have tall ships festivals come into town where you've got these large flagships come in. We are the only port in Pennsylvania. We have this little notch that I think is probably about 40 miles wide, give or take. That is what we call Pennsylvania's chimney. We're the only part that sort of touches the water.
Okay.
But it gives us all kinds of opportunities to do things like that. But we take a lot of pride in it's sort of that underdog spirit of Erie, Pennsylvania. That even when the odds are against us and things and there's 100 inches of snow on the ground, we're gonna persevere, right? But no, we love the fact that we have that flag mark. It's part of it. When we started, it was one of our cap logos. Over time, we realized that we're the SeaWolves, and folks want to buy wolves on hats. So it's become more of a alternate sleeve patch type of concept. We have it on the front of one of our jerseys as well. So it plays a nice supporting role, and it's a nice way to really pay tribute to Oliver Hazard Perry and Erie's role in that pivotal war.
Absolutely. So you all participate in the Copa de la Diversión program, the Spanish language alternate brands that minor league baseball teams do to expand the reach of minor league baseball. And the Erie SeaWolves during their Copa days are the Piñatas. Can you talk about how come you would choose the name Piñatas for a baseball team?
Well, I can tell you it's not because the Eastern League beats us senselessly with with sticks.
I'm picturing the Portland Sea Dogs with a blindfold just swinging a bat around right now.
There are a few different reasons behind it. At its core, a piñata is filled with fun, right? And we want to be when people come out to the ballpark, we want to surprise them, we want to delight them, and that's exactly what happens when you're hitting a piñata. But going even further, we are unusual as a minor league baseball team. We have a Mexican-born owner, and he came to the United States to play baseball in college, stayed here, became an American citizen. Tremendous success story. His name's Fernando Aguirre, was the CEO of Chiquita Brands for a number of years. And but when it came time to pick a Copa de la Diversión nickname, we kept coming back to piñatas. It reminded him very much of his youth growing up in Mexico and those great times that the family spent together. And I think our trick was to try to figure out what would be the right form. A piñata can take a lot of different shapes. We wanted to make sure we picked one that would resonate. We also had to walk a very fine line to make sure that the piñata didn't communicate something we didn't want it to communicate. And ultimately, we came down to what is essentially a bull, and it's sort of like the piñata is almost fighting back against the person that's hitting it with the stick. It has kind of that certain spirit, and it almost has the same sort of sensibilities to it that our main logo does, right? It's like, I'm not going to go down fighting, right?
That's great. I know it's a totally fun. I mean, I love all the Copa brands, and that's a totally fun one. The idea of having to clarify though that it's not here just for the other teams to whack us with baseball bats, I think is an important one.
I'm a little surprised the other teams in the league haven't taken more advantage of that, but they're kind and gentle and they're good friends, I guess.
Well, hopefully they they're not listening carefully to this part of this episode. So, Greg, this has been fun. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with me.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and we look forward to having you out at UPMC Park soon. The ballpark went under $17.5 million of renovation since 2019, so not only a great brand, but it's a great place to catch a game. So hopefully soon.
Awesome. I know that the SeaWolves are easy to find on all the social media, but are you on social media? Is there somewhere where people can follow you specifically?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SeaWolvesGM. So that's the easiest way to find me, and and I am fairly active, though I probably spend more time with the team accounts than probably with my own personal account. But yeah, you can always ping me on there, and quick to reply.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg. We'll look forward to catching a game next season, and good luck on the off season.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Paul.
All right, everyone. Once again, I'm so happy to be joined by my friend, Dan Simon, the great designer, Dan Simon, who has done so much for minor league baseball and so much for this podcast, and sent me the hat that I'm wearing right now, this very cool Erie SeaWolves cap that I am wearing right now. Dan Simon, welcome back to the podcast. I always love talking to you.
Likewise, and thank you so much for that hyperbolic introduction.
We're digging deep into the memory banks here, because this is a logo that you probably worked on it a decade ago. The team unveiled it in 2013, so it's been a full decade since you probably worked on the version of the logo that exists now for the team. But before we get started, I have to point out that you are wearing the lime green, like almost a fluorescent green Frankenwolf right now. And so let's jump right into this, because we Greg and I talked about the sort of origins of the team name, and I'm going to talk next with Chuck from the Erie Maritime Museum about maritime history in Erie, Pennsylvania. But this wolf character that you created, or at least updated from their previous logo, has had a lot of different permutations. Greg and I talked a little bit about that, but let's talk about the origin, about where this idea came from to have all these different versions of the wolf character, including the lime green Frankenwolf that you're wearing right now, with the sticker still on it, by the way. Controversial.
Well, that's when you say controversial that the sticker's still on it. I see kids nowadays wearing caps without taking that off. I always took it off, but I'm thinking maybe I need to get with the times. So this is less a matter of I haven't taken the sticker off yet. I don't know if this is how they're supposed to be worn. I want to be with it.
You've got, it's a sort of a dichotomy you have going here, because you've got the dad hat fit, you've got the curved brim and the soft top, but then you've got the cool kid sticker still on the brim there. So it's
well, this is a dad hat.
Yeah.
It's adjustable, but let's see, what is the brand of this? It's New Era.
New Era,
and
yeah.
And it has a lot of dad hats are kind of what do they call it? Not loose fitting, but
unstructured.
Yeah, unstructured. That's exactly the word I was seeking there, searching for. That's the prototypical dad hat fit. This one's kind of, to me, a little bit of a hybrid between a 5150 and a dad hat. It's got a little bit more structure, but again, it does have the curved brim and a little bit closer to the head fit. But I kind of like the way it bridges the gap between the two styles.
Well, and it's got the lime green brim, which you have to love. It's an excellent use of Halloween colors. I, of course, am wearing, as always, the 47 brand dad hat that I always wear, and this is one that you sent me, which I love.
Happy it found a good head to sit on.
That's basically what my head is for, actually. So that works. Dan, let's talk about the logo on that hat. Frankenwolf with the Halloween theme, because at the time of this recording, we're 10 days out from Halloween. Where did the idea come from to create all these different characters from the Erie SeaWolf himself?
Well, it started with an alternate identity that Greg Coleman came to me to create for him, which was for the Erie SeaWolves. There was a winter not all that long ago, 3-4 years ago, where Erie had record snowfall, record for Erie, that is. If I'm not mistaken, they had over 140 inches. We're talking about 12 feet of snow in one winter season. I can't even imagine that. I'm originally from the New York, New Jersey area, and I remember some pretty high snow buildups on especially snowy winter seasons, but not 12 feet. And I realize some of that melts away, but still, that is a lot of snow. So Greg put out a tweet saying that if this was right around the time they were about to break the record, if they got another snowfall towards the end of the season, which they did get, he put out a tweet saying, if we get X amount of retweets, whatever it is, we will rebrand for one game as the Erie SeaWolves. They got the required number of retweets, and lo and behold, the Erie SeaWolves was born. That one proved to be fairly popular. very well received, fairly popular. And seeing that, I was thinking, well, why stop there? So I called up Greg and I said to him, Greg, that one worked pretty well. We've got this character that that we like, and rather than creating alternate identities that are quote unquote off brand, like the tacos or the cheesesteaks, which are great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with those. I love those types of alternate identities, but we like our brand here. They also have alternate identities like their Copa identity, which has nothing, the piñatas, which has nothing to do with wolves or specifically sea wolves. But we like our brand. Let's build that brand. Let's do a brand expansion. So I said, what if we went, took a look at the calendar, looked at the holidays and other potential events, and build out multiple iterations of our Seawolf character. I said, but do you think that would be beneficial? You think you can use that? And he said, why, yes, Dan, yes, it would. I think that's exactly what he said and exactly how he said it. So the two of us looked at the calendar, and there were some obvious ones like Christmas. We're going to do a Christmas one. Teams have already done that. You put a Santa hat on a character, but really, why stop there? So we landed on St. Patty's Day, July 4th. On my head right now, Halloween, Armed Services Day. And then there were some other ones, like he says, we do birthdays at the park where kids or adults can celebrate their birthday at the park. We put their name up on the scoreboard, and I would imagine maybe even their video of them on the scoreboard. So there's one with a birthday hat on. At the time we were doing this, they were doing stadium renovations, and he said, Dan, I'd like to have a construction hard hat on this, so we can place some signage around the stadium, hard hat area, and use this. And then we also did a superhero Seawolf character, which was at the time not done for this reason, but I would imagine with this new Marvel, what are they called? Help me here, Masters of the Universe.
I think so. You might know that better than I do. The minor league Marvel thing has not exactly landed with me, I have to say.
Nor with a lot of other people, but it's a major initiative where, if I'm not mistaken, with all of the 120 affiliated minor league teams, they're all going to have this Marvel version of their characters. So even and apparently it was Marvel artists who did all of these. Designers like myself and Brandiose and whoever else, as far as I know, didn't do any of these. I think it was all Marvel artists. But we do have a superhero version here that I think will work well with that promotion for the Seawolves. And so we ended up having 8 different versions of the wolf, in addition to the snow wolf, in addition to the original pirate version of the Seawolf. So and who knows, there's always the opportunity for more to come. It's something we can build on forever. Whenever something else comes up, hey, let's do this version.
Well, and this is something that you have done with other identities as well. I mean, when you started talking about this, I thought immediately of what you've done with the Burlington sock puppets and the possibilities for future characters, future sock puppet characters. I mean, it seems like the possibilities are limitless.
Yeah, and certainly the Seawolf stuff predated the sock puppets. With the sock puppets, to be completely honest, it was not derived from the thought process here with Erie. That was its own, that happened organically with the team. That was something that they had this vision for. So I'll be honest and give them, not that I'm never dishonest, but I'll give
we got
them...
our fact checkers working on this podcast every time you're on, Dan. It's true.
Yeah, you need that with me. Credit where credit's due. That came from those guys in Burlington who were great guys and very creative in their own right. But this is something, you could do this with virtually any team. So,
Sure.
hey, teams out there, if you want to do it,
Designers are standing by.
yeah.
So when you redid this brand, I remember speaking with you back in 2016 when I wrote this article for sportslogos.net about the team. And I was sort of struck at the time because you always find a way to sort of contort yourself and your words to never say anything unkind about anybody. And it was as hard as ever for you to not say anything unkind about the logo that you updated from the previous iteration of the SeaWolves brand. Was one that was, let's just say, desperately in need of updating. And then this new one that came out in 2013. I'm going to just keep talking over that. I'm not even going to give you a chance to respond unless you really want one.
I'll respond to this.
Okay, go for it.
Going, but finish your line of thought there, and I'll this time around I will respond.
Okay, no, go for it, because I was going to move on to another question. I was just going to breeze right past it and then move on to another question.
Well, here at Studio Simon, I've done brand updates for numerous teams where I'm working with an existing look and I am improving upon that.
Mm-hmm.
A perfect example would be, go back to episode 4 of the Baseball Design Podcast, the Toledo Mudhens. They had a brand identity that was imperfect. It was to some degrees, the rendering was a bit crude, but there was also something good about it.
Mm-hmm.
And whether from an illustration and or design standpoint, it was quote unquote good, it was beloved. And moving away from that was just not something that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So what we did there is, it's kind of like let's talk about, I often use building construction as an analogy for sports branding, at least with brand updates, mm-hmm. where you have a house. It might be a wonderful house, but it's a little long in the tooth. Mm-hmm. And what you want to do is some remodeling. And you might put in some new cabinets. You might even move a wall here and there to improve upon it. But you want to maintain the existing character of the house. And when everything's done, it looks a heck of a lot better, but it doesn't feel like you threw away the baby with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. So that was exactly the case with the Toledo Mudhens. And it's been the case with a number of other similar approaches we've taken here. And currently I'm working on one that's almost the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. In the case of the Erie SeaWolves, not just from me, not just from the pundits, but from the fans, there was no love for that logo, nor the artwork itself. As a matter of fact, Greg Coleman stated, so this is not coming from me, he stated that it scared women and children. and so in this case, this was not the type of remodel I described earlier in this conversation. Yeah. It was a complete teardown.
Yeah.
and it needed to be. So
sure. Well, what you did come up with, obviously, and this is, Greg and I talked about this, it derives, it certainly has some similarities to the Pirates brand, because the team has its roots there. And this is, that's something that Greg and I talked about. But in the process of coming up with this terrific new version of the Erie SeaWolves logo, you proposed a couple of different things, including one that I think maybe might have also scared women and children sort of in a different way, which was a version of the logo. And I'm going to put this on Twitter when this episode goes up, and it's on the sportslogos.net article that I wrote. But it is the skull of a wolf with, a couple of baseball bats with sword handles on them, and the SeaWolves text that you did end up using for this brand. That was a pretty intimidating looking logo, and it had the red eyes and it had the wolf skull. And ultimately the team, I think, shied away from it because it might have been, again, a little too scary for the team, but it was a really cool logo. I think it probably would have been well received out there in the world.
Well, yeah, it was that was a matter of presenting something to the client to show what some other possibilities were.
Mhm.
I realized at the time it was a long shot, and I didn't have a lot of money down on it, meaning it wasn't like, man, I really hope they pick this one. If they don't, they're making a big mistake. It's more like, yeah, I think we're going to go in this direction, the direction we ultimately went.
Mhm.
But even though we've had discussions with the team beforehand about what the roadmap for this brand update is going to look like or should be, you never know. They might see something that they haven't already brought up or that I have not necessarily suggested already in our discussions prior to putting pencil to paper and mouse to pad. But upon seeing it, they might say, we didn't really think about that, but maybe,
Mhm.
let me give you a perfect example, a real life example. When I did the brand update for the Jackson Generals, which was maybe not more, maybe it was not a brand update in this case, but a rebrand because they had been the West 10 Diamond Jacks. So
Mhm.
they were changing their name, and if there was no character we were already basing it on because
Right.
they weren't the generals and now we needed a general character. And I remember specifically they asked me for three things. They wanted one that kind of felt like Beetle Bailey from the old comic strip. They
It's a
wanted,
deep cut.
right, one based on General George Patton
Okay.
from famous World War II general.
Even deeper cut.
Right. And although it is deeper if you go back to World War II, but there's also a well-known movie, Patton, starring George C. Scott. Not to be confused with the George Scott first baseman who used to play for the Brewers and the Yankees and the Red Sox.
You
But
sure it's
anyway,
not the same guy? That would have been interesting. There's a career for you.
if I'm not mistaken, George C. Scott won the Academy Award for Best Actor for that performance. If he didn't win it, I'm almost certain he was at least nominated. But
We'll get
so
our
anyway,
we'll get our Dan Simon fact checkers on this right away.
yes, please do. But come on, that movie was early 70s, so not as deep cut as the 40s when World War II took place, but still a pretty deep cut. And then the last direction was Jackson, Tennessee is named after former President Jackson, who was also a famed general. So Andrew Jackson, for those who want to know his first name as well. And so I knew that they wanted those, and those directions for potential for them to potentially have for their identity were presented. But I was also thinking there's something missing here. And it's kind of obvious what was missing, which was some type of an animal character, which so many baseball brand identities tend to be for good reason. And so I ended up doing, I was thinking, well, what animal would represent a general? And I came up with the idea of doing it as a bulldog. They didn't ask for that, but I presented it just because you never know. Upon seeing it, they might like it. And that's what they ended up picking. So that said, doing a skull for a minor league baseball identity, probably a skull is not the right way to go for the official team identity. And specifically, Greg said that when he started, he says, this is really cool, but I don't really think this is what is going to work best for our official team identity.
Yeah.
But I will say, even though a skull represents the dead, that logo may not truly be dead, and I'll leave it there.
Oh, that is a teaser to end all teasers right there. That's a fun one right there. I was even going to say, well, I'd love to see them, revive this, as it were, and bring it back to, maybe see the light of day. So the red-eyed wolf skull Erie SeaWolves logo may yet live. I can't wait for to see where this goes. Dan, this has been so much fun. It's always so much fun to talk with you about these brands. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for wearing the Frankenwolf hat while we were talking. That made this extra fun. As always, people can find you at studiosimon.net and on Instagram, studio_Simon. and still to date, not on Twitter, though I'm going to continue working on you for that.
Well, and thank you for having me. And thank you, Baseball by Design listeners, for listening. Once again, without you guys, this podcast wouldn't have a place in the pod sphere. So thank you guys. Thank you, Paul. I look forward to the next time we can tell more stories.
Dan, happy Halloween to you. I realize this will probably drop shortly after Halloween, but happy Halloween to you and your Frankenwolf cap.
Oh, happy Halloween to you as well. What are you going to be this year, Paul?
Well, I'm actually talking with Baseball by Design wildlife consultant Ranger Amy Burnett. We're talking about going as Jimmy Dugan and one of the players from A League of Their Own as a League of Their Own duo.
Well, looking forward to seeing photos of that on your Instagram. So please make sure you share that with me and your listeners.
I definitely will. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Paul. Bye.
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is a treat right now. I am joined by Chuck Johnson, who is the museum educator with the Erie Maritime Museum. So we can really delve into this Erie SeaWolves nickname, the maritime history of Erie, Pennsylvania. Chuck, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh man, this is fun. I'm looking forward to talking about the maritime history of Erie, Pennsylvania. And so there's like just like that one tiny little bit of Pennsylvania, my native Pennsylvania. I grew up on the other side of the state, but
yeah.
in Erie, there's like the only coastline that we have in Pennsylvania is like right there on Lake Erie. And so you guys have the Erie Maritime Museum to tell the story of the maritime history of Erie, Pennsylvania. So I'll just ask you sort of, I realize this is a huge 30,000-foot question, and you could probably talk about this for a long time. But in a nutshell, what's the maritime history of Erie, Pennsylvania?
Well, it's really interesting, and you did bring it up. I like to tell people that if not for Presque Isle, which is the little sand spit that is right outside my window, Erie wouldn't exist in the sense that it does today. But also, I don't think Pennsylvania would have that little piece that connects the state to the Great Lakes and the interior, which is really neat. But the Erie Native Americans, which was an Iroquois-speaking tribe, first really settled this area to fish in Presque Isle Bay. And over time, the French had come here. They built forts. The British had built forts, and then eventually in 1795, the first true American settlement cropped up right where I'm sitting. Within a couple of years, they had been building ships. We had obviously the War of 1812 that was pretty prominent out here, which, obviously has a lasting impact, not only with Erie, Pennsylvania, but as well as, the Erie SeaWolves, because that's really where that nickname starts to, or at least the logo starts to come into play. But Erie is a very, maritime centric town, still to this day. We're not building ships as much as we used to, but obviously shipping industry, the commercial fishing industry, which at one point this was the epicenter of the largest freshwater fishing. We called ourselves the freshwater fishing capital of the world. Like I said, that connection to the water is a big piece of Erie's culture, and it's what we at the Erie Maritime Museum try to tell.
So you mentioned the War of 1812 and that having sort of a specific connection to the SeaWolves. It was the flagship Niagara, I guess. Is it still there? Is it still docked in Lake Erie, the flagship Niagara?
Yeah, it's right outside my office, which is really neat. It's a reconstruction. It's a different incarnation of the original, but the original was Oliver Hazard Perry, his relief flagship during the Battle of Lake Erie. These ships were built really fast. They're meant to do one thing, and that's go out and meet the British, and they did that September 10th, 1813. And this ship that we still have right outside still sails the Great Lakes and carries on that tradition.
So if I'm a visitor to the museum, what can I experience there in terms of, like, can I get out there on that ship, or can I, what am I seeing and learning about and experiencing at the museum?
It's really interesting because the Brig Niagara, as it's called, is the official flagship of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So When you come to the museum, a lot of what we do supports that ship. The museum is focused on the War of 1812 and that maritime connection. We have a lot of different exhibits detailing shipbuilding and fishing and all that. But really, when you come here, people mostly come to see the ship. It's a very beautiful tall ship, as we see it. And you can go out there, and we do offer day sails, so you can sail along the Great Lakes and experience what it's like to sail on a 19th century warship. It's pretty cool.
So I want to get a little nitty gritty here. You used the phrase tall ship, and that's come up a couple of times on this episode already. So from your expert perspective there, what is a tall ship?
A tall ship is a vessel that I'll get into it. So the mast heights of the brig Niagara reach up to about 118 feet. They're tall. They're really tall. So off the water, they sit high off the water. The ship itself, the actual ship portion is pretty small. But once we're talking about the actual size of the masts and all of that. So like I said, it's a big ship. When you get out here, you don't expect to see something that sits that high off the ground, or off the water, I should say.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool, actually. The nickname, the Erie SeaWolves, is Seawolf a term that is used sort of commonly outside of the baseball team? Like, does the word Seawolf appear on any of your signage at the museum?
Shockingly, no. It's not something that you see traditionally.
So from your professional perspective, being an educator at a museum that is dedicated to maritime history, do you feel like if you had been consulted in 1995 when this team was being renamed, that maybe if they came to you with the Erie SeaWolves, you might have said, hey, how about the Lake Wolves? Because Lake Erie is not a sea?
Probably. I get why they chose the name. I get it. But yeah, I would probably go with something more akin to what, to the Great Lakes themselves. But I mean, people call these things the Great Lakes themselves inland seas. So I mean, it is what it is. But it's a unique name. It's really something that people do love here, and you see a lot of SeaWolves paraphernalia, or apparel, I should say, around the city. So yeah, like I said, people enjoy it.
What's something that people don't know? What's something that surprises people when they visit the Maritime Museum? Anything about Erie and its maritime history?
I think especially with out-of-towners, Presque Isle Bay is, like I said, it's right outside our building itself. We're sitting right on it. And people assume that Presque Isle Bay is the lake, and beyond it, they don't realize that it stretches out towards Detroit. It's a huge body of water. So I think the biggest thing that people are surprised with is this is a massive body of water in the grand scheme of things. But not only that, the Battle of Lake Erie, our ships were built here in Erie, but the battle itself was fought out beyond Cleveland, Ohio, at what's Put-in Bay. So it's on the other side of the lake. So I think those are the two predominant things that people tend to be surprised about.
The Great Lakes are enormous. I was shocked by that. I mean, I grew up on the eastern side of Pennsylvania, still go to the Jersey Shore every year. So I'm used to the ocean, and you're accustomed with an ocean of just looking out at the horizon, and it just, the water just takes you all the way to the edge of the horizon. I was shocked the first time I saw a Great Lake when I visited Chicago, right? And I was just like, oh yeah, these are massive bodies of water here.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, this is, it's such a cool thing. I mean, I never would have learned all of this history if I had not started looking into the Erie SeaWolves, right? And in every one of these minor league baseball teams, I always discover these places like the Maritime Museum, and the stories that you all tell, and the history that you keep alive, and the sort of dating all the way back to the first Native Americans who populated that land, and all the way up till now, where we've got the Erie SeaWolves, which
Yeah.
maybe I think I'm gonna start calling the Erie Lake Wolves now and see what they do.
They'll be fine.
Yeah, no, yeah. Maybe it's a special like rebrand one night or
There you
something. They
go.
play as
There
the
you go.
Lake Wolves. So, well, we talked in the pre-interview. I see that you've got the Red Sox banner hanging behind you. You're a Red Sox fan.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about your history going to Paw Sox games. Given that you're a baseball fan, do you have a social media presence outside the museum? Is there somewhere where people can follow you?
Yeah, I don't really have a public Instagram, but I have actually I could probably send it to you.
Okay.
It's an Instagram page. I talk a lot about maritime history, so I guess it is a professional page,
Yeah.
if you want to call it that. But that's something I can send because it's hard to say it. You just have
Okay.
to
Okay.
see.
We'll put it in the show notes, and I'll put it up on Twitter when this goes live. And then
Well,
obviously the Maritime Museum. Where can people find the Maritime Museum?
Yeah, so we're at www.eriemaritime.museum.org, and you can find us on social media on Facebook, Instagram, at Erie Maritime Museum.
Fantastic. Well, Chuck, thank you so much. This has been a ton of fun.
Awesome. It was good to meet you, Paul.
Nice to meet you, Chuck. Thanks for doing this.
No, thank you.
Take care.